Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. Today is Wednesday, April 7th, and the time now is 9:04. Notice for this public hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice and change. One was issued on Tuesday, March 30th, and on April 5th. And for the record, today is April 7th, Wednesday, the time now is 9:04. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on the appointment of Karl E. Corpus. The position is a member of the Board of Commissioners, Guam Housing and Urban Renewal Authority. The term length is 5 years. And he'll fill the seat of Joseph Leon Guerrero, whose term has expired. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me this morning. I have Vice Speaker Tina Rose Moon Barnes. I have the Majority Leader, Senator Talina Nelson. I have Senator Joanne Brown and Senator Jim Moylan. The general rules for this public hearing. Those testifying on behalf of Mr. Corpus will be recognized in the order of the sign-up on the sign-in sheet. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you're done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Question and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda, which is the appointment of Mr. Corpus. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individuals testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the public hearing by myself. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for this proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony or may be asked or will be asked to leave the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and your title for the record. We will now begin to discuss the appointment of Mr. Karl Corpus. I also have listed here Mr. Ray Tapasna. Is Ray, can you get Mr. Tapasna to come inside and have a seat inside? I have present Mr. Corpus and the lady next to your name, ma'am?
Daphne Leon Guerrero.
Daphne, okay, you would be on the next. So if you want, you can step outside and then we'll call you in. Okay? I just don't want, you don't have to sit in through Mr. Corpus and. Yeah, Ray. Thank you, Ray. We will now begin first with Mr. Karl. If you can go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about yourself.
Good morning, everyone. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Karl Enrique Corpus. I'm in my upper 50s. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, but have lived in California and Washington State. I'm currently living at the Guerrero 35 house in Dededo with my wife and 4 children. Since arriving on Guam, I've worked mostly in the security industry, 10 years as a security central station manager with Pacific Security Alarm, a supervised technician with Secure West, it's now G4S now, and currently working as physical security for the Guam Medical Plaza under the Guam Radiology Consultants. Being at a moderate income and living in housing, I hope to bring some of the insights and different prospects to the board. My hobby is woodworking, and there's nothing more pleasurable to me than to take a piece of wood and create something useful and or beautiful. I was always asked, when I was asked to sit on the board, I believe it was this hobby that was my main reason for agreeing to be part of the board, that my insight and my own usefulness to the board in my own way. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tapasna.
Test. Thank you. For the record, my name is Ray Tapasana, and I am the Executive Director of GURA. I am here today to testify in full support of Mr. Karl E. Corpus, Mr. Karl E. Corpus's appointment to the GURA Board of Commissioners as the sole resident commissioner. Mr. Corpus resides in our public housing AMP4 development located in Dedido. We are pleased that he has agreed to step up and fill the vacancy left behind by former resident commissioner Joe Leon Guerrero, whose term expired back in September of last year. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, mandates that every public housing authority have at least one person on its governing board who is either a public housing resident or a part of a Section 8 voucher household. If confirmed by this body as the resident commissioner, Mr. Corpus must be treated no different from the other 6 members of the board according to HUD rules. As well, he still will be held to the same standard as all residents of public housing. The GURA Board has extraordinary governing powers granted to them by Congress, no different from housing authority boards nationwide. But along with this special power comes great responsibility. As such, we've given Mr. Corpus a lot of reading materials to get caught up, and we will be scheduling him to take an ethics and government course very shortly. The board is responsible for overseeing over $160 million in federal aid for FY21. GURA's last board meeting of Friday, March 26, was actually postponed due to a lack of quorum. I recall this only happening once in the last 2 years and 3 months under the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration. The sooner we get Mr. Corpus on board, the less likelihood we will encounter postponements or cancellations. This particular postponed board meeting involved having commissioners familiarize themselves with the application process for approximately $66 million in low-income housing tax credits. Time is of the essence to build affordable homes when so many are struggling because of the pandemic. I also want to take this opportunity to request of our oversight chair to increase the board stipends at GURA. Currently, the GURA board receives $50 per meeting, as they normally meet twice monthly. In all fairness, I am pleading with this body to increase the stipends to at least $125 per meeting, to be capped at $250 a month. Most board and commission members in Guam currently get paid about $100 per meeting because they meet only once a month. In closing, once again, I want to restate my support for Mr. Karl Corpus to the GURA Board of Commissioners, and if this body can act at the earliest convenience. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee. I also want to read a testimony from, or a letter of recommendation from one of our property site managers who actually oversees the development of which Mr. Corpus resides in, if I may. Hafa Day. This is from Phyllis San Nicolas, and she's the property site manager for Dedido. I highly recommend Mr. Karl E. Corpus to serve as the resident commissioner to the Guam Housing and Urban Renewal Authority Board of Commissioners. As the property site manager to AMP4 site base, I have observed Mr. Corpus' participation on activities related to the site base. He actively participated in resident meetings relating to the smoke-free policy, marijuana policy, and public housing authority plan to include capital fund program, to name a few. He was an active member of the resident advisory board representing the residents for AMP4 site base. As a member, Mr. Corpus showed a keen interest on the projects lined up for all the developments in the Capital Fund program. He inquired if other projects could be added that would involve the unit living conditions. Mr. Corpus is also an active member of the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. This program enables HUD-assisted families to increase their earned income and reduce their dependency on welfare assistance and rental subsidies. Mr. Corpus has an action plan and is on track to complete his goals. Mr. Corpus has been a resident at the Gura 35 development for 5 years. I consider him to be a model resident. And this is a letter of recommendation from Phyllis San Nicolas, the property site manager for Dedido. And that's all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ray. So noted for the stipend. I'll take care of that in a bill, a separate bill from the appointment of Mr. Corpus.
Thank you.
Madam Vice Speaker, do you have any questions to pose unto the nominee? And I would go through all my colleagues before I do the closing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mananas Tizuas. I just want to take the time to thank both you, Mr. Corpus, and Mr. Tapasnia for having Mr. Corpus step up to the plate to be a part of the discipline for the resident member. Not an easy task, but having seen and hear from the statement you read from Philly that he's been very active in his efforts in going to a lot of these meetings. It just knows that he's well versed into the programs that Gora has. And I want to thank you, Mr. Corpus, for your volunteerism in this efforts. And I hope that the oversight chair could expeditiously do the committee report so that we can vote on your nomination on this session month. So you'll get my support. Sana Maasi, and God bless. Thank you.
Madam Majority Leader, Senator Talina Nelson. Ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Corpus, for your testimony, and Mr. Tapasnia. I want to thank you for stepping up to the plate and looking to serve the community in a much larger scale. I appreciate that. I just have a couple questions. What is your goal if and when you are nominated and confirmed? What is your goal when you serve on this board? What would you like to see happen?
Well, I have to read a lot of this notebook that I was given on the insights of what actually I'll be doing as a board member besides, I mean, I have the general idea of what will happen is I'm providing oversight, or my opinions on oversight, that GURA will be spending the HUD dollars for. My main accomplishment for me personally will be to, I guess, put something back in the community to help improve the residents of GURA, the people who are really trying to get on their own, not just to go from generation to generation, but to actually move out of housing. Since I've been in housing, my life has improved muchly. My wife has attended class at the Bell Tower, which improved her life by getting a job with a medical facility. My son is going to college, second year. I have another boy that's just graduating. It provides more stable household, and in turn, I think will make better citizens.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Corpus.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, at this time, I'd just like to note that we are receiving federal assistance in greater numbers than we had in the past for GORA. And also, I hope that the board and GORA will look for opportunities to collaborate with Guam Housing Corporation and other public-private partnerships in a way to create more housing opportunities for for our local families who are currently renting and are paying a high price, a high dollar amount for rent when they can be paying a lower amount for mortgages. And so I look forward, under your leadership, Mr. Tapasnia, to see some kind of fruition of developing more housing opportunities for our community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator Brown, do you have any questions to the nominee?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and certainly thank you, Mr. Corpus, for your interest in serving your community. You had elaborated a bit on what benefits you have received and what you would like to see within the Gura housing activities and plans there. Could you elaborate a little further? And then ultimately, is it your desired goal, ultimately, as you had mentioned briefly for others perhaps, to be able to one day be able to build or acquire your own home? Is that the objective? And
Yes, ma'am.
how do you see this helping you get there and helping your family and maybe other families get that ultimate goal that a lot of people would like to have?
Well, it does take an effort on the individual to want to get out of the housing, get on their own feet. And my personal feelings are it's just a stepping stone. I believe this is not going to be a for good situation, me being in housing. I'd want to actually, in the future, buy some land. If there's any programs to assist with that, that would be great. I know there's plenty of classrooms are learning things. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but there is an opportunity through Gura to have the classroom material or the education from Gura to buy or in fact own my own home in the future. I think Gura's set up for that. And the main thing is that after going through the program, being with it, I can see my family coming out on the other end much better than when we came in.
And then if I could ask you to elaborate, aside from, being able to live in the Gura home, what are the things about the community that you see as a benefit for you and other families that actually live in Gura versus, probably other communities that don't even have that kind of support structure that you have there in your Gura housing?
I believe Gura housing is about it for Guam as far as the Section 8 and the whatnot. I'm not sure of any other community or government agency that provides more assistance than Gura.
I mean, so much in terms of your housing community. Are there benefits that you see there, that support system there that you talked about?
Yes.
Because, I mean, obviously other villages may not have the opportunity, even if they own their own homes. The community within which they live doesn't have that support structure. So I just wanted you, if you could elaborate on that. Living in a Gura housing, is there anything other than just the home that's provided, or are there other support systems there that are provided for you and your family or other families?
I'm not sure where your question's going, ma'am.
Is there any other type of programs or activities that are provided for you or your family members that you're aware of living in the Gura housing, other than simply just the physical structure of the home?
Oh yes.
That's what I wanted to ask you, if you could elaborate on.
I am on the self-sufficiency program, in which actually, like I stated earlier, my wife had gone through that and was able to get nighttime classing and job placement through the FSS program. Me currently right now, I'm pretty much set in my job. Is this kind of reassuring that I could actually go back to school now that I'm older, and that actually Gura is actually providing a way to do that, with all the different benefits or the program things. I'm not just alone here. Every housing participant has the same opportunity. It's only they need to apply themselves to do so.
Sure. Well, and I think that's an important message to relay. I mean, sometimes people need assistance to take a step up, and some take advantage of it, and I think we're very appreciative of your interest in further serving your community, and it's wanting to see many other members of our community do the same. That it's a stepping stone to self-sufficiency, and ultimately, like in your case, and I'm sure with other families, wanting to be able to have their own home that is theirs, that they own and they can enjoy, and I mean, ultimately what the things we look at as ideal in our life that we're aiming for. Is this the first time you've served on such a board like this, or have you served in other capacities in a board?
I've never been involved in any government Guam facilities or boards or anything like that. This is all new to me.
Well, hopefully your newness to the process would provide some greater insight and just the most practical sense of the challenges and issues and improvements you want to see. You know, that those insights are things that you can contribute to the GORA board. Well,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you very much for your comments, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to ask these questions.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Jim Moylan, do you have any questions to the nominee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Corpus, congratulations.
Thank
being
you.
Being a resident there as well for 5 years and all the participation that you've been doing within your community, I think it's a natural progression. I'm just hoping you stick with it, because sometimes coming to a board means like, what have I done? You know, why am I doing this?
I have been thinking that myself.
Right. But I'm sure your intent seems to be there. You actively participated in these different programs. You have a great letter coming from your project site manager. That's all good things to say for you. If we were neighbors, I would be happy that you were my neighbor as well. So
Thank you.
good for you, and I hope you do really well and really participate as you've been doing so far. So thank you for accepting your nomination.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Mr. Corpus, you're not going to hear any objection from me. I welcome you to the family of GORA. Like Ray's mentioned, they didn't have quorum. We're going to try to resolve that by the end of this month. This committee report should be done by then and submitted, so we can get you wrapped up and in the pocket and help them get what they need to get done. Because GORA is a fast-moving agency. 160 million, that sounds a little bit low. I think it's a little bit more, Ray, but I'm not going to push on that. I'll leave that alone. But there's a lot of activity that GORA has. They just need participants in their board, active participations. And as long as you participate and you help them get what they need done and approved and sent off, then everything will just work its way. Yeah. And I hope for the best. And there are no further statements or questions to be posed. The committee will continue to receive testimonies. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. Agustin at gmail.com or to my office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 Marine Corps Drive, Tumuning, Guam. Si Jules Masi for your attendance and participating in today's hearing. Mr. Corpus and Mr. Tapasna. And for those at home, thank you for watching. The public hearing on the appointment of Karl E. Corpus is now adjourned. It is now 9:27. Have a nice day, Karl and
Thank you,
Ray.
sir.
Take
And
care.
Board, please.
Thank you.
Step right in. Thank you. Good morning. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriations and Housing is now called to order. Today is Wednesday, April 7, 2021. The time now is 9:30. Notice for this public hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. Public notice was issued on March 30th, April 5th, and today is Wednesday, April 7th. The time now is 9:30. Committee will hear and accept testimony on Ms. Daphne M. Leon Guerrero, a member of the Guam Ethics Commission for 4 years. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me. We have Vice Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes, Senator Tina Munoz-Barnes, Majority Leader Senator Talina Nelson, Senator Joanne Brown, and Senator Jim Moylan. Those testifying on behalf of Mrs. Leon Guerrero will be recognized in the order of the sign-up. On the sign-in sheet, we'll start with Ms. Leon Guerrero, and then we'll go to Mr. King, and then we'll go to the, I didn't get your name yet, but not a problem. I'll get it in a minute. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you're done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony. So I'll ask all three of you to please just stay in place after you've done testifying. Question testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda, which is reference to the nomination of Ms. Leon Guerrero. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general conduct will result in your removal from this public hearing. Proper form requirements shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for this proceeding. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and will be escorted from the room. When you speak, please make sure the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. You will state your name and your title for the record. We will now begin to discuss the appointment of I say Ms. because I'm not too sure if you're married or not, Ms. Daphne M. Leon Guerrero. And we'll begin with you, Ms. Leon Guerrero, please.
Good morning, Senators and Agustin and senators present today. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. My name is Daphne Leon Guerrero, and I would be a member of the Ethics Commission. And I feel that my background and my education has prepared me for a role on this commission. Every day as an HR professional, I do face ethical dilemmas and challenges which entail tough decisions that are firm but fair, and also take into consideration not just the employee, but also the employer's perspective. So I definitely feel that my background and the work that I have done so far, as displayed in my resume and in my packet, has demonstrated my capacity to sit on this board. So I thank you very much for your consideration, and I am open to any questions that you may have for me. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll ask now Mr. Kenga, and then you'll be followed by Mr. John Rivera.
Thank you so much to Chairman Senator Joseph Agustin and members of the committee. My name is Jesse King. I'm the Executive Director for the Guam Ethics Commission, and here to testify in support of the nomination of Daphne Leon Guerrero to serve as a member for the Guam Ethics Commission. The first point I'd like to make is upon review of the ethics statute, you'll find that 5 members are required at minimum in order for an action to take against a concern ethically related. And currently the commission has just 5 members. So that puts at risk that if any one member is unavailable, that potentially we would fall with certain complaints not being heard. Daphne presents an opportunity for us to add an additional member, removing that possibility. And beyond just adding the member, Daphne's background with SHRM and HR is a real valued asset to our organization. Daphne in addition to her professional career as an HR executive, is also president for the Society of Human Resources Management Guam chapter, which shows her commitment to service above self and service in our community. So I thank the governor for her appointment of Daphne Leon Guerrero to the Ethics Commission, and we welcome her voice because it will bring a balanced perspective to those already serving on the Ethics Commission. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rivera, and we do have your written testimony, so go ahead. You can read that if you want.
Sure, Hafide, Mr. Chair, Senator San Agustin, and honorable senators. My name is John Rivera, and I'm a tenured associate professor of public administration at the University of Guam. And I did submit a written testimony, and I'll read it for you today. I offer this in support of Daphne M. Leon Guerrero as a member of the Guam Ethics Commission. Government ethics is essential to good governance because democracy lives in the care of public trust. Trust is given and must be earned at every moment by the people we serve. Those who are entrusted with this dignity of governance then have an unwavering responsibility to uphold the values of that office with humility, service, and sacrifice. I have every faith and confidence that Daphne will safeguard these values and be an asset to the Commission. I've known Daphne for a good number of years. First as a former undergraduate student with the School of Business and Public Administration, the BBA program, and then as a graduate student in our professional Master of Business Administration. She's articulate, thoughtful, analytical, all with the brevity, maturity, and integrity that enriches her thinking. She's self-motivated and action-oriented. I could always count on her and rely on her to take initiative, especially in the instances where others lack the necessary fortitude and courage to do so. What I appreciate most about her, though, is her compassion and sincerity, coupled with the prudence of justice and fairness. I've had the privilege to work with Daphne on many projects and can attest to her professionalism and caliber. Over the years, I've personally worked with enabling legislation that sets forth the mandate to train leadership in ethics. I understand inherently the need for this commission and the need for those to guide it with dignity. Daphne will undoubtedly make an excellent addition to the Ethics Commission, and I'm honored to submit this testimony. Sedus Masi.
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. We do have testimony that was submitted from Mr. Colfax. Dr. Colfax. I guess he was your instructor at one time, Daphne, so great. We'll begin asking my colleagues if they want to ask any questions of the nominee. Madam Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Mananasitos. I do have a comment and want to thank Mr. Chair Daphne for stepping up to the plate. As I heard the testimony from the Executive Director, Mr. King, and also from Professor Rivera, Dr. Rivera, I want to say thank you also for coming in support with her. As I heard the accolades that you mentioned, and knowing and working with you in the last 8 terms and what you've done with the university and the work that you support with the students, and then working closely with her in the graduate school, I just want to say, and I looked at your resume, and being a part of SHRM and being in the committee and working your way up, as far as the employer that you have today, I think the professionalism you have from the outside arena working and then coming in to support the efforts of government and understanding that, I think you have all the ingredients necessary. I don't know you personally. I know of you, and I just want to say thank you for what you've done to support the SHRM, and thank you for stepping up to the plate. I want to share with you personally that I will give you my vote, and I think if there's anything that I appreciate was that I want to thank the governor for taking the initiative to making sure that the implementation of the Ethics Commission is finally done. And hopefully with Ms. Leon Guerrero being on board or confirmed, this will then complete the complement of the board. Am I right? Would that complete the the board?
It'll bring us closer. We'll have just one member vacancy should this be confirmed.
Oh, then we're
One
still
additional.
short one.
Yes.
But you will have quorum. Thank you so much, and thank you, Ms. Leon Guerrero, for stepping up to the plate. God bless you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Sanamosi.
Thank you, Madam Vice. Majority Leader, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Daphne, I want to thank you for volunteering your time and service. I believe that the government will benefit, especially with your extensive human resources background in this Ethics Commission. I do hope that as the Ethics Commission goes forward, though, they also continue to educate the employees and the people within the government on what the role of the Ethics Commission and the process of hearings and complaints, and also the processes of determination. And so I look forward to that. I look forward to some kind of educational campaign so that the members in the government or those that are a part of this, that the commission oversees, is able to understand your roles. I believe this is something that's been in existence in statute, but it's just now being implemented. And so we look forward to that. And thank you again. I have the utmost confidence in your ability. I really appreciate that you're coming from the private sector, having a different lens on how to look at solutions and findings. So good luck, and you have my support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Senator Nelson. Senator Brown, ma'am, do you have any questions for the nominee?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I certainly also appreciate your interest, Ms. Leon Guerrero, in serving on the Ethics Commission, but I wanted to get some insight in your thought process. I mean, you're going to probably, I'm sure, with the rest of the board, be presented with some interesting scenarios because, that we were just discussing yesterday requiring ethics training in the government of Guam because historically it's just been focused on individuals that are the heads of agencies or elected officials, and not everyone stays in those positions for long periods of time. There's always changes with regards to that. And yet the body of the government that actually runs the government day to day and runs it for months and many years, some 30, 40 plus years, an employee can actually sit in their respective positions and acquire, a lot of, we hope as they move up in the leadership process that they're leading things properly, but many acquire their own kingdoms and manipulate the process of hiring, benefits, contracts. I mean, I'd like to think that doesn't happen, but, I'd be looking at things very differently from the reality of what is actually going on there. And I think that certainly moving forward and requiring ethics training is important so that all the key mechanisms in the government that operate and all the parties involved in that actually have an awareness, even though I think most of us have a general idea of what's right and what's wrong. Doesn't mean we always practice it. So how do you see, I mean, this is a little different than sitting on other boards and commissions. I mean, you're going to be reviewing and judging over the actions of others, and what makes you qualified for that aside from your credentials? I mean, what are your own ethical values, and what will you be looking at as you look at, I'm sure, a whole variety of cases that are going to come before you?
Right. Well, I think that my experience and my background has prepared me to face these types of ethical dilemmas and challenges. When you speak of ethics training, I think that's very important because, as you said, it needs to be reinforced. And ethics is something that, I see it as how we do compliance training in our organization. So every year we do have to review these policies such as sexual harassment, conflict of interest, all of those types of things for our employees just to reinforce our stance on what is acceptable behavior and what we expect from them as employees of the organization. So it almost needs to be trained like a muscle memory. So we can't just do one instance of training and then expect that, oh, everything's fine and we don't ever need to do it again. It always has to be constantly reinforced, and it also needs to come from the top, right? So in my work, I have had to face a lot of decisions involving and not just regular employees, but executives who have maybe done some or perpetuated some behaviors that may conflict with our existing ethics policies or conflict of interest practices. So I have had to make decisions on those, on the ramifications of those behaviors. And not only that, but the company that I belong to, we have a very unique structure. So we have a lot of different organizations under us, a lot of different personalities, and a lot of different structures. So I think that has allowed me to be able to flex a little bit in terms of my decision making, and it's not just tailored to one specific situation. Yeah.
Well, I certainly look forward to it because I think it's something we want to see institutionalized in the rest of the government. I mean, those of us in these positions are very visible to the public.
Right.
At least they, on average, may know who we are, may have their own thoughts and whatever the case may be, but the scrutiny under which we live is very, very visible. The rest of the government, we shield, almost to the point that the people of Guam have really no expectation of accountability because we shield actions. I mean, if a police officer gets accused of something, misusing their position, oh, we can't discuss that, that's a personnel matter. And I personally don't understand the value of why that is shielded from the public because I believe we're all public servants. And if the body of the government cannot respond and react and be accountable as the public tells us they want us to be, you know, then there's a challenge there because there's not that level of discipline that exists in most of the government of Guam, particularly in larger agencies. Sad to say. I mean, that's been my 30-plus years of experience. And so I wish you well. I certainly look forward to the outcome of the work that you're doing because it's something no doubt our public desires to see and we have an expectation to see. But I think it's going to be an adjustment period, and that's why I think the educational aspect is very important. I've been before the Civil Service Commission where they've asked me in management, you know, why haven't we trained supervisors to simply show up to work? And I don't understand that. That to me is beyond or beneath elementary. Simply expecting people to show up to work on time and do their job to me is not something I need to educate. You know, someone who's been working in the government for 25 years that they need to come up and show up to work, especially when they're in charge of other personnel and they have responsibility. I mean, they know better. Right. But we have those type of discussions, you know, and we're like, what is that? So I didn't send him to training to know he needs to show up to work and, you know, execute his or her responsibilities. I mean, it's as elementary as that, or like I said, maybe kindergarten, maybe pre-kindergarten to some degree of engagement. But that's the reality of where things are. And I think we expect better. I think the public expects better. So I certainly wish you well. I mean, hopefully as people become more aware, they know there's consequence to irresponsible actions. Hopefully they'll be more responsible. But I appreciate, again, your service. It's an interesting, it's not one of those like you're being appointed to GBB or something like that.
Right.
You're certainly being given a very interesting task to serve, so I appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much,
much,
Senator
Mr.
Brown.
Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Moylan, do you have any questions of the nominees?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Daphne, congratulations on your nomination. Great resume there. I know you'll do great. But for this public law, it was implemented back in 2004, right? And I'm happy that the governor has appointed Jesse here to get it started and that we're getting members into the commission. But it's been 17 years, so I anticipate you guys will be quite busy from day one there with many concerns. If you keep up with the news, there's probably concerns about procurement, there's public safety and favoritism, and you're going to have so much to deal with. I hope you stick with it. You know, coming from the private sector, and you know, you can get things done kind of quickly. Government kind of moves a little different, but I think you really have the expertise to work well with your other colleagues there also. In the current law, it also says that the governor, you know, has appointed you and will confirm you, but she also has the authority to suspend and remove you. And sometimes popular decisions may not be the right one if you wish to remain in your position, but I'm hoping you will make that right decision to do just that. And then the public is going to be waiting for these reports that Jesse would have to produce for us, and then we're going to take action on it. And the legislature has to take action, but also the media is going to be looking at you folks like, if you had to wear sunglasses going to the grocery store, maybe you want to do that. But I applaud you for taking that position, and I'm sure with your chairman here, good things will be done. And I really appreciate that when people do come to make these ethic complaints, that they feel safe, that they can give their report to you and say, please do something, please help us. And that's my main concern. But congratulations. I'm looking forward to your confirmation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Vice Speaker she got a message. She want to be able to read it from Mr. Brian Bamba.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This message is from Mr. Brian Bamba. Dear Senator San Agustin, half a day. My name is Brian Bamba. I am the Managing Director of IP&E Holdings, LLC, and I would like to submit my written testimony in support of Daphne Leon Guerrero's nomination to the Guam Ethics Commission. I have known Mrs. Leon Guerrero for several years as a colleague and friend. In her role as the Director of Human Resources for our group companies, Daphne has exemplified qualities of professionalism, fairness, transparency, and integrity. She has managed a balance of process while doing what is fair and just for all, regardless of company, position, or responsibility. Additionally, she serves as the president of the Guam chapter of the Society of Human Resources, which takes her skills to a wider group and represents the entire private sector workforce. It is these qualities that we hope to have within the Guam Ethics Commission to ensure the variety of issues brought before the Commission and handled with transparency, integrity, and fairness to all. I would like to thank the members of your committee for the opportunity to provide this written testimony in support of Daphne Leon Guerrero. I believe she will serve the people of Guam well, and I look forward to her confirmation. Regards, Brian Bamba, Managing Director, IP&E Holdings, LLC. Mr. Chair, he noted to me in a message that he really wanted to get down here and to tell Mrs. Leon Guerrero, but he's still at that meeting and can't get up. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to read his statement for the record. Sign Amasi.
All right, thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. Daphne, the only thing I was looking at your packet is, I'm going to safely assume you're in line of going to get your doctorates, right? I mean, everybody else has got a doctorate, and I'm just going to ask that question because I know Jesse would love to get his doctorate, but you're going to be a director. Just stay with your masters, and we get the doctors to tell you and give you the direction you need to go, right? Look at John. John's there like, yeah, let's stick with the program. But Daphne, I do look forward to your participation as the Oversight Chair for Ethics. I want to make sure that if it's wrong, it's wrong, and if it's right, and move on. And if the people don't like it, well, that's too bad. Let's get on the right track and let's just get it fixed. I like your background. There's a lot of HR background, which is perfect. Because we're all talking about the employees. They're conduct themselves correctly. Just do what's right. That's all. That's all everybody ever asks. We don't ask for anything else. If you do the right thing, you'll be okay. You mess up, do the time, and pay the fine, and move on. With that, the committee will continue. The Vice Speaker gave me, because, as Senator Moylan brought up, 17 years, the ethics wasn't moved. Oh, I'm not going to worry about that. It's moving now, right, Jesse? Yes. And Mr. Dr. Rivera, it's moving now. Let's get it on track. Let's move down this road. And I'm not worried about if the governor wants to suspend or remove anybody, because I believe that if this body is true to its word, they want things done right, they remove, we'll find a way to put her back in. We'll do what we need to do. Just get it right. That's all the people of Guam is asking for, no matter what, and transparency. That's the key. The committee will continue to receive testimony for the next few days, actually even less, because I want to make sure your packet is ready to go before the body on session this month. Please address your testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. San Agustin at gmail.com or to my office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam. This is Jules Masi for your attendance and participating in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. The public hearing on the appointment of Daphne Leon Guerrero is now adjourned. It is now 9:54, and thank you, Ms. Leon Guerrero. Dr. Rivera, Jesse, I'll be seeing you soon, right? Thank you. All right, take care. Have a nice day. We will do a quick break while they sanitize the area before we begin the next bill, which is Bill 32-36. Thank you. Ed, we're ready, Ed? We'll turn it on. For today, the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. Today is Wednesday, April 7, and the time now is 10:04. Notice for this public hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. Public notice were given on March 30th, April 5th, and today is April 7th, and again, the time is now 10:04. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 32-36, introduced by Senator Jim Moylan, an act to amend Section 6224 and 6225 of Article 2, Chapter 6, Title 4, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the administration of hazardous pay for custom officers and the adoption of a table of organization equipment for the Guam Custom and Quarantine Agency. I'd like to acknowledge the attendance of my colleagues. We have today Madam Speaker Therese Terlahi, Madam Vice Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes, Majority Leader Senator Talina Nelson, Senator Brown, and then the author of the bill, Senator Jim Moylan. Those testifying on behalf of Bill 3236 will be recognized in the order of the sign-up on the sign-in sheet. And on the sign-in sheet, we have, beginning with Mr. Vincent Perez. I think that's the colonel, right? Or the chief, okay? And then followed by Francis Farron. And then Mr. Joe, this is Joe Ganji? Okay. And we got Maria Aparon or Alvin? All right. And then we have Franklin Gutierrez, who's outside. He'll come in after the four of you are done. Written testimonies is submitted to the committee. We have written testimonies. They should be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with a written testimony for photocopying. Testimonies may be read, and lengthy testimonies should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you're done, officials just advise you, you're all asked to remain until the committee is done asking you questions. Then you'll be excused, and then the last individual will be allowed to come in. All right? Question testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. We're talking about Bill 32-36, so let's focus on just the bill, nothing else. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in the removal from the public hearing. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for this proceeding. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted and will be escorted from the room. When you speak, please make sure the microphone is on and you speak into the microphone. You will state your name and your title for the record. We will now begin to discuss Bill 32-36. I will begin with the author, Senator Jim Moylan, and followed by the Vice Speaker, who has additional statements to make before we ask the panel to please speak on behalf of the bill. All right, Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening this public hearing this morning on Bill 3236. So Bill 3236 is about some initial steps forward in modernizing the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency from the administrative perspective, particularly on how hazardous pay is administered. Now, we introduced a similar measure in the 35th Guam legislature after many, many discussions with both the management of the agency as well as the customs officers. And there were a few things that were concerning. Now, first, while officers do qualify for hazardous pay, it's the administrative bureaucracy at the Department of Administration who determines what constitutes the hazardous situation. And it's not the law enforcement officer in the position of leadership who understands the role and the situations these officers endure every day. Now, we learned that the current position or current process is tedious, and basically it's an administrative nightmare, which creates delays in the processing this hazardous pay that is well deserving of the officer. I had the opportunity to witness in the chief's office boxes of forms dating back for months of things that were turned back because wanting more information from DOA to justify the hazardous pay. And that's the bureaucracy we're talking about, and that's what this bill wants to correct. And it's also unfortunate that the Customs and Quarantine Agency is not treated at the same level as the Guam Police Department when it comes to how hazardous pay is administered. They have a system where GPD management was authorized to adopt a table of organization and equipment, and this tool would identify hazardous duty positions. And likewise, the Guam Customs Agency should be able to do the same thing. So Bill 3236 provides the Guam Customs Authority officers the same opportunity afforded to GPD officers, where their agency, not DOA, but their agency approves what constitutes a hazardous condition. And after all, you know best of how that should be done. But unfortunately, the legislation in the 35th Guam legislature was unable to move further, and then we went into the pandemic mode. However, one thing was pretty evident as COVID reached our shores. We were placing the Customs and Quarantine officers in the greater risk of uncertainties, whether they were at the airport or at the port doing their jobs. So this legislation is more than about modernizing how hazardous pay is administered at the Guam Customs Authority, but it is about supporting the officers and taking one agency several steps forward. Also, just for a note, before we start our testimony and moving on to, of course, the Vice Speaker, we've been asked by other agencies who also employ sworn law enforcement officers if the language can be further amended to include their entities. For that, I say, please share your stories through testimonies, and we can take it from there. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking forward to Madam Speaker's continuing testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Madam Vice Speaker, do you have?
Mr. Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. Manana Sizos to the panel members here, thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank the author of the bill, and more importantly, the Oversight Chairman for having this hearing. I want to say, as Oversight Chairwoman on Human Resources, this has been something that I've looked at not only for Customs, but also for the Airport Police Department and the Airport Rescue and Firefighting. Section 6225B, which we are seeking to amend today to include Customs. Mr. Chair, the irony of this is that based on, and I'll give you some history from the 33rd Guam legislature, at then was bill number 355-33, which is now public law 33-195, which established section 6225B. The version that was introduced was specific to establishing hazardous pay for the men and women of Guam Customs. That bill was then substituted on the floor to allow for Guam Customs, Guam Airport Police, conservation officers, Park Patrol, youth and service workers at DYA, as well as those employed by the AG's office. After reading the committee report for Bill 351-33, I noticed that what we are trying to address today is exactly what then Major Phil Tyron Jr. and Major Darlene McFarland, the acting director at the time, who outlined the reasons why we needed to amend the law to allow for Customs to be included. Furthermore, today, as we are asking for Customs to be allowed to establish a table of organization and equipment, which is toll, they had already included that in their testimony to us in 2016. Mr. Chair, I hope that by the precedents that was set by this body in 2016, when we substituted the same bill, amending the same section of the code, that we included other agencies into the bill, I hope we can do the same here to include ARF and APD. As the Oversight Chairwoman on Human Resources, I have been doing an analysis of the code as it pertains to human resources government-wide. This past week, I had written to the airport's general manager to inquire on the status of hazard pay for the airport police officers. From my understanding, the previous general managers had refused to pay out hazardous pay as they had deferred to their legal counsel, to who opined contrary to the Department of Labor, former Chief Bob Camacho of the Airport Police Department, Chief Vince Napoli, the current Chief of APD. And from my understanding, prior to COVID, the current leadership has been working to rectify this, and when COVID hit, the differential pay through the governor's executive order kicked in. Working closely with the airport police chief as well as the author of the bill, I have asked legal counsel to opine on an amendment that I will be introducing to this bill, Mr. Chair, to allow for the airport police chief to also adopt toll so that the chief of APD can have the same flexibility and authority as the Guam Police Department. Currently, you have APD officers performing mutual aid responses for GPD, who we all know is inundated and understaffed. APD has stepped up, responding to emergencies to keep our people safe. APD, in an effort to maximize their force posture, also has guards employed under APD who are also exposed to the same hazards and have even been assaulted when restraining a perpetrator. My amendment would also allow the chief to include his guard in the toll. Also, another thing that has apparent in Substitute Bill 351-33 is that while we included GFD as those who are eligible for hazard pay, we inadvertently forgot to include ARF. Our firefighters stand ready to respond to any crisis, and even recently they stepped up and assisted GFD in the Sang Brothers fire in Harmon. ARF also provides a medical response unit as needed, and I believe that we should treat them with parity for their role in our community. I had invited both representatives from Airport APD and ARF to provide testimony, and I hope that their testimony can be submitted in time to be included as part of the committee report, as well as the findings of our committee, so that we can move this bill forward with my amendments. I understand that given the last-minute notice to them, they may not be here. I don't know if they're here or not, but I just want to express my gratitude to all the men and women of APD and ARF, as well as the leadership of the airport, who I understand are also working on this issue. Also, I want to again thank Senator Moylan, who was open to working with me on this issue, and you, Mr. Chair, for facilitating this hearing today, and I will work closely with you as this bill moves through the committee process. And before I close, Mr. Chair, I think it's really important. I know we may want to talk about germaneness and all that, but based on the findings on what we did in the 33rd Guam legislature and waiting for the legal opinion, this was an avenue that I could work to make sure that it was all inclusive. And it was opined back then that all of this was relative. And now that we continue to give the customs officer what is rightfully due to them, then I work in that same effort to see that parity is given across the board as that oversight chair. So, Mr. Chair, thank you, and I will submit, ask if I could submit the findings, the investigative findings, to the committee as excerpts for history and what has happened in the past. So thank you, and si Diyos masi, Mr. Chair. I also want to apologize. I do have a family funeral that I need to get to. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Madam Vice. I'd like to also recognize that, number one, we have other folks that are also in support of the bill. We have Danilo Pocaigi, Joe Villagomez. We have Apareda, Naliri, I'm not too sure. Okay, we have Dolores Flores that are also signed in. I just want to make it very clear, the only reason why I'm hearing this bill is because it deals in money. Otherwise, it would have been heard by Senator Talina Nelson, the majority leader, as the oversight for customs. Also understand, before you testify, a little bit about my background when we talk about toll. Retired from the Army, I dealt in toll. I know what toll is all about. So be careful how you want to talk about toll, because I am very familiar how toll is created. I think Ganji knows me from the garden. I'm very familiar with it. I'm just kind of not comfortable that it's not in your job description to get the hazardous pay. That's what kind of bothers me a little bit, but I'm going to let you all testify. Speak your mind. We'll gather it all together. We'll take a look at everything that the Vice Speaker brought up and what other senators are pursuing, and then we'll measure from there on how we need to go. Because I do want to take care of customs. I do have friends in customs, family and friends in customs. They have approached me and I said, I'm in support of getting you hazardous pay, provided you have a need to have it. You have a requirement to have it. If you're sitting in the office and you're not really doing anything that relates to what you need to do to get hazardous pay, that's when I'm going to have some problems. But if it's in the books that you're entitled to it, then you should get it. That's all it needs to be. You need to put it in the books, and if this is the bill that needs to get in the books, then so be it. We'll move on from there. We'll begin with Chief Perez. Sir.
Hafide. Good morning, Senator Agustin, Chairperson of the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing, Speaker Terlahi, Vice Speaker Munya Barnes, our Chair, Senator Nelson, Senator Moylan, Senator Brown, members of this esteemed committee. My name is Vincent Perez. I'm the Chief of Customs. I'm here to provide testimony on Bill 32-36. Okay, so some background on why this bill is necessary. So in December of 2016, Public Law 33-195 was passed into law. Upon the passage of this law, the agency informed its officers of the intention to pay out the hazardous duty differential of 10% effective the date of the enactment. However, CQA has not been able to pay any of this out, as within the law, there is a provision that states that the appointing authorities and the Department of Administration shall identify direct exposure personnel and, upon exposure, shall be entitled to the 10% hazardous pay differential. Although CQA maintains that our officers are always exposed to these risks, be it microscopic, viral, environmentally, or hazards encountered while conducting patrols or performing high-risk enforcement actions, there is disagreement by DOA on what can be validated as upon exposure and to what constitutes hazards. Still, to this day, no hazardous duty differential has been paid out. I suspect that other LEO agencies might have the same challenges with the justification of upon exposure. CQA has always contended that as customs, who are first responders, and now during COVID-19 as quarantine officers working at the ports of entry, they are exposed to pandemic and biosecurity risks. Our officers are assisting the Guam Police Department and also assisting in conducting prison contraband searches with DOC, working with our federal law enforcement task forces, and have been exposed to hazardous situations or conditions while performing their duties as law enforcement officers. Some of our officers were recently exposed to TB at the ports of entry. These same officers have assisted in law enforcement raids, prison searches, high-risk warrant serving, high-risk entry, and vehicle takedowns. Still, to this day, no differential has been paid out. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached an impasse. DOA and Customs have gone back and forth in attempting to rectify this matter, but to no avail. In July of 2018, Customs coordinated with DOA to identify and establish which CQA positions are under the hazardous duty, to develop a hazardous duty matrix and additional forms that would need to be implemented for validation by DOA. CQA would submit a request for approval for hazardous duty direct exposure personnel along with the hazardous duty matrix for review and validation. Once submitted, would be reviewed and need approval from DOA. In November of 2018, DOA approves the CQA request and identifies the officers as direct exposure personnel in line with the public law. However, hazardous duty differential was not paid out. CQA has continued to meet with DOA on several occasions in an attempt to mitigate the challenges and issues they've encountered. During this period, all payroll documents for payout of the hazardous duty differential have been returned to the agency with no action taken. In May of 2019, DOA had sent a memorandum to CQA based on a site assessment conducted on CQA operations by DOA personnel specialists. DOA made recommendations to submit copies of CQA's daily status report to justify the differential and for their verification purposes. CQA has complied, but the differential was not paid out. In February 2020, CQA met with DOA regarding the challenges once again, and DOA was looking at simplifying this in order to process the differential. Based on DOA's recommendation, Customs was to revamp its formal process. Customs would discontinue the use of the hazardous duty codes matrix, and based on changes recommended by DOA, would develop a simplified standardized hazardous duty justification and timesheet for approval by DOA. Still, differential has not been paid out. Please keep in mind that since December of 2019, Customs was already dealing with CDC and public health protocols for arriving passengers who originate from high-risk COVID-19 areas. Officers were exposed and continued to be exposed. Customs was responsible for identifying, isolating, and interviewing these passengers, as well as coordinating with the public health for more in-depth screening and quarantine action. And we've also had officers and continue to have officers assigned to the quarantine facilities today. And still, no hazardous duty differential has been paid out. What is interesting to note is that because of COVID-19, the governor's executive order developed a government-wide hazard differential at 10, 15, and 25%, which was less complicated in its application than the application of the 10% upon exposure law. Still, to this day, no hazardous duty differential has been paid out. Our agency has already lost one of its finest officers because of exposure to COVID while on duty. Still, to this day, no hazardous duty differential has been paid out. I've been requested by the widow of Officer Rennie Tamunda to read a statement in support of this hazardous duty. So she starts off to the honorable senators of the 36th Guam legislature from Ms. Davina Leonis Tamunda, written testimony in support of 3226. Buenas and half a day. I am honored that you are giving me your kind attention by listening to my testimony. My name is Davina Leonis Tamunda. I am the widow of the late Customs Officer Rennie Tamunda. On September 25, 2020, my children and I, along with the rest of our family, had gone through a life-altering experience, one we will never forget. That was the day that a son, brother, father, and husband was lost forever. Rennie was a wonderful husband and father who always made sure that we were all taken care of. He loved his family, especially his parents, his brothers, and their families. He will truly be missed. My husband loved his job as a customs officer. At night before bed, he would make sure that his uniform is ready to be put on for the following duty day. And every day he wore his uniform proudly and lived by the law enforcement code of ethics. He performed his roles and responsibilities as a customs officer to the best of his abilities and rarely missed work because he was proud to serve our island. For 7 years, he gave his life to serve and protect our island with loyalty and integrity. Like his brothers and sisters in blue, they all know what dangers they may face while in the line of duty. And even with extra precautionary measures, sometimes things are beyond our control. On August 31st, 2020, Rennie came home from work coughing, which we treated with over-the-counter medication, thinking that he caught a cold because he got rained on while conducting an inspection days prior while on duty. This was the last day that our children saw him because I had instructed him to stay away from our kids just in case it was more than a cold. Little did we all know that this was the last time we would see their father. 2 days later, I began showing the exact symptoms he displayed. At the end of the week, his condition worsened, so we decided to get screened for the coronavirus. After he was informed by his supervisor that his partner at work had tested positive for the virus, then on September 5, 2020, we both went to the clinic to get screened for the virus, and on September 7th, we received a call from the clinic confirming that we both had tested positive for the coronavirus. Early morning the following day, on September 8, I was awakened by Rennie gasping for air. He was breathing heavily and complained of chest pains. I immediately assisted him in getting dressed and drove to the fire station where he was then transported to GRMC. and that was the last time I saw him physically. Within the next few days, my father and mother-in-law started showing symptoms and also relative to the coronavirus symptoms, so they too went to go get screened at the clinic where it was confirmed that they both were infected with the virus. Rennie loved his family unconditionally and did his best to protect us all from any harm or danger. He reported for work daily to fulfill his duties and responsibilities as a customs officer. It was while stationed at the Port Authority doing his duties as a customs officer, along with his fellow officers, that he was exposed to the virus, which he inadvertently brought home, causing exposures to his parents and myself. His elderly parents and I were fortunate enough to have fought the virus, but my husband wasn't. On September 25, 2020, he had succumbed from the virus, leaving behind a 9-year-old son and the rest of the family. Like all frontliners, there are many hazards that one may encounter while at the workplace on duty. These hazards may include biological, chemical, physical, safety, ergonomically, even psychosocial. Not all hazards are obvious, which can make it difficult to immediately identify, which places all customs officers at risk daily of such hazards. And it's these conditions that may lead to one to experience what my family and I currently are going through. It's been over 6 months now, and we continue to mourn the loss of our beloved, the late Officer Rennie Tamunda. My husband lost his life because he was exposed to the coronavirus while performing his duty as a customs officer. Not only did he lose his life, but he brought home the virus, which also infected his mom, dad, and myself. Rennie wasn't the only officer who had been exposed to this virus while stationed at the port. Other officers had also tested positive of the virus. If the tragedy that our family experienced isn't enough to say that these officers do indeed work in a hazardous environment, what is? Honorable Senators, this concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Chief. We will now have, Chief, can you make sure we get a copy of your written testimony? Because I'm going to be asking you a question after the panel is done. One simple question I'll be asking you. We'll have Mr. Francis Farron, or no, yeah, we'll just go to the Colonel. Okay, go for it.
Good morning, Chairman San Agustin and members of this committee. My name is Colonel Francis Farron. I'm an Assistant Chief of Customs and Quarantine Agency. We'll be providing testimony for the Director of Customs and Quarantine Agency, Mr. Ike Pareto. He has a previously scheduled obligation this morning and regrets he cannot make it at this time. Good morning, Chairman San Agustin and members of this hearing committee. My name is Ike Q. Pareto, Director of Customs and Quarantine Agency. Before I begin, I'd like to thank each of you for the opportunity to testify in support of Bill 32-36. Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency is Guam's first line of defense. We are the principal enforcers of all activities crossing our borders daily, applying appropriate customs and territorial statutes at all of Guam's ports of entry or other areas which entry into our island is made. Additionally, we collaborate extensively with our federal and local government entities by enforcing their vast mandates at the borders. CQA's mission is to protect our island, its people, and resources while facilitating legitimate trade, commerce, and travel. During the performance of their daily border enforcement duties, every customs officer experiences and are exposed to unknown hazards, working conditions, and situations in order to detect, prevent, intercept, and mitigate serious threats such as deadly or illicit drug substances, chemical, biological, or radioactive substances or contaminated items, exotic diseases present in animals, animal products, or plant material, and highly contagious communicable or infectious diseases while performing customs duties and responsibilities. Guam Customs officers are the front line 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, ensuring that every threat and danger is mitigated before harming our environment and our community. Over time, law enforcement responsibilities have evolved due to new enforcement mandates, to the events of September 11th and the war on terrorism, to the various natural disasters, and now with the ongoing pandemic. The expectations of law enforcement will continuously evolve, and Customs have not been isolated from these expectations. Customs officers face increased work hazards centering around border crossing activities, facilitating the movement of persons, commodities through our border while performing interdiction operations and investigations related to increased transnational crime, terrorism and counterterrorism activities, contraband smuggling of inferior or dangerous commodities, illicit drug smuggling such as methamphetamine, fentanyl, and cocaine, and agricultural and biosecurity threats detrimental to our local farm cooperatives, ecology, and the food supply. These increased law enforcement responsibilities performed by Guam Customs officers are constant and will continue to evolve as globalization and trade activities increase, resulting in the movement of more logistics, commodities, and persons through Guam's borders. Therefore, the intent of Bill 32-36, amending and simplifying the current statute for customs officers to receive hazardous duty compensation, is needed and allows for equitable compensation for customs officers in line with other government of Guam law enforcement personnel. Prior to June 2016, customs officers received compensation for hazardous duty pay. The agency was budgeted and paid hazardous pay differential for officers performing hazardous duty. During that period, the only officers receiving hazardous duty pay differential were officers performing work boarding or physically getting on arriving sea vessels, conducting or participating in drug raids, or executing search warrants necessitated by our investigations, and officers maintaining custody and transporting of arrestees. In June of 2016, the agency was budgeted to compensate hazardous pay differential for specific duties to positions previously certified and recognized as hazardous. However, the Department of Administration internal controls discovered the Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health annual assessments and certification for hazardous duty conditions were not recertified. As a result of the recertification oversight, hazardous pay differentials ceased. Despite this, customs officers continue to perform these hazardous duties fundamental to their duties and responsibilities because of our statutory mandates to enforce border control operations and investigations. Customs officers perform these necessary and hazardous duties regardless of proper or deserving compensation. The agency's budget provides hazardous duty compensation. However, DOA's financial controls do not. Due to the current language contained in Public Law 33-195, which states that the appointing authorities of Customs and Quarantine Agency and the Department of Administration shall identify and direct the direct exposure personnel, and upon exposure shall be entitled to the 10% hazardous pay differential. Bill 32-36 provides the resolution for customs officers' hazardous duty pay ambiguity by allowing CQA, through internal general order, the adoption of a table of organization of equipment identifying positions to receive hazardous duty pay, mirroring the same process provided to officers of the Guam Police Department. In closing, I would like to thank the committee for the opportunity to testify before you today and kindly urge members of the legislature to support Bill 32-36 in our quest towards protecting our island, our people, and our resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Joe?
Good morning, Chairman Agustin and honorable members of this committee. My name is Joseph Leon Guerrero, Custom Officer 3. I'm currently assigned to the Maritime Port Operations. During my time there, I was injured on the job by container inspection, which I think is still under investigation with our Triple F. So I'm not at liberty to discuss all the details. Other than that, I was injured while inside that container when a steel wall fell on me. So as far as hazards, those are things that you don't expect. You don't expect it at all. And then with my fellow brothers and sisters in the agency, with the hazardous, it's a plus, but we lose a lot of our officers just on the pay disparities and just on the inequalities between other agencies that perform the same type of work, meaning they go through the hazards that we go through every day. These are the things that we hope that this committee will rectify. I thank you for your time and matter in this situation, and I hope that something good comes out of all of this for all agencies that are involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Something will come out of this, definitely. Ms. Apron?
Hafaday, Madam Speaker, Mr. Chair, Senator Moylan, Senator Nelson, Senator Brown. Thank you for your time this morning and for giving me the opportunity to submit testimony regarding hazardous pay. My name is Maria Apron, 23 years in law enforcement, 8 years of that at the Guam Police Department, with my last assignment as a detective at the Criminal Investigator, and 15 years at my current position as a criminal investigator with the Prosecution Division at the Office of the Attorney General. Let me be clear, I am here to express my personal views in support of Bill 3236, and I signed leave to make this possible. I find it concerning that I have to sign leave to be here to address this body concerning the issues of hazardous pay that may affect me and my coworkers who are exposed to the same hazards as that of other law enforcement entities. I'm not here to represent my office. I know they were given the opportunity as Senator Moylan's office has reached out, but I am here. I, along with my colleagues, would like to share information regarding our duties and responsibilities and why we should be afforded the same hazardous pay compensation as like other law enforcement agencies. Last year, in the midst of COVID, we were activated to report to work and investigate price gouging. Geared with a mask and plastic gloves, I reported to work and proceeded with my partner to several business establishments. Unknown to me what I may be exposed to or what to expect, regardless, I had a task to accomplish, which was to conduct my investigation, take photos, gather facts. With the emergence of the COVID pandemic, although public health published guidelines, there was minimal to no concrete direction. Therefore, my colleagues and I were susceptible to contracting this unknown virus and what the short-term and long-term effects would be. For all we know, there would have been a possibility that one of us may have contracted COVID and brought it home to our families. Thankfully, my family as well. But unfortunately, like mentioned previously, if you recall on September 25 of last year, we lost a fellow law enforcement officer from the Customs and Quarantine Agency who contracted COVID. He was also a friend of mine. Other frontline responders have also been exposed and had to be intubated at the hospital, but successfully overcame it, and others succumbed to this deadly virus. We in law enforcement report and respond to all types of calls involving robbery, burglary, murders, home invasions, sexual assaults, to name a few. Sometimes callers can be specific to better prepare us, or sometimes it's unknown and a threat to our own life or the community. Can you imagine, Senator, if an irate person with a machete is coming at you or your family, and their intention is to do harm, and there's no GPD or AG investigator to prosecute, then what is the outcome? Who determines the definition of hazardous pay, hazardous situation, and how it applies to our jobs to safeguard the people of Guam and its employees? Furthermore, the sacrifice of people who took an oath to uphold the law and protect human life is priceless. How can you designate job description based on the same premises of law enforcement? Where is the equality? We are not here to ask for the impossible, but to ask for equitable hazardous pay across the board for law enforcement, to include 16 people strong at the AG's office, and I'm referring to the criminal investigators. As an AG investigator with Prosecution Division, I can share my experience as a lead investigator that I am in constant contact with defendants, victims, witnesses. 60% of the time, it may be felony cases involving family violence or criminal sexual conduct or drugs, and the reporting person is being pressured by the defendant to drop the case. Our burdens encompass locating victims or witnesses, and our jurisdiction is practically the whole island, with the exception of the northern and southern point, Air Force and Naval Base. But we work alongside the investigators with those federal law enforcement. We have to locate victims because they constantly move residences and try and avoid prepping for trial or testifying in trial, and no return calls. It also becomes problematic when we later discover that both victim and defendant are residing under the same roof but have to be told that they violate a stay-away order, and we are mandated to report it to the court. This is a very volatile type situation. The defendant can decide to go after the victim's family, other witnesses, or me for that matter. As a patrol officer back then, I've received threats. Of course, I was in fear. In the 80s, early 80s, back then chief investigator was working a high-profile, multi-million-dollar corruption case regarding developers. There was a person who was actually commissioned to carry out a threat against him, although that defendant had already taken a plea deal. So you see, who can put a price on this? There's no percentage, there's no amount for us to qualify for the hazardous pay. Another situation I'd like to share is when arriving at a residence to find out that defendant had just left the victim's place, and the victim mentions the defendant violated a plea agreement and manages to get an outstanding warrant. Marshals don't know that he has an outstanding warrant. If he comes back, we're there. We have authority, we have right to effectuate an arrest. There's a chance for the defendant to return, and we would have to deprive him or her of their freedom legally. And defendant may be combative since he doesn't want to go back to jail. These people are not passive. They don't conduct themselves in nonviolent manners. Instead, we are confronted with a hostile person, whether it be out in the streets or in the courtroom. And that has been my experience. This is the nature of the job. And our job is to ensure that people who commit these crimes are held responsible and justice is served. Generally, we conduct routine investigations relating to civil or criminal cases or complaints of alleged violations of laws, rules, and regulations filed with the AG's office. We conduct interviews, collect and preserve evidence, examine records and documents, serve warrants of arrest or execute searches and seizures as necessary, perform surveillance and stakeout, assist and coordinate with federal, military, law enforcement, or local enforcement personnel, gather, analyze, evaluate, determine facts or information obtained in each complaint lodged. These are basic requirements that we conduct as criminal investigators from the Juvenile Civil Division, Civil Solicitors Division, and the Prosecution Division. However, there are also a myriad of other duties and responsibilities as an investigator. We are required to attend training that is often attended by GPD and for certifications. as like other law enforcement agencies. We are expected to respond to active shooter incidents and bomb threats. As you can recall, sometime around 2015, there was a bomb threat made to the ITC. That's where we're situated. We were responsible for evacuating people of that building pending the arrival of GPD. We assist federal agencies in the execution of warrants. We are responsible for the safety of victims and witnesses to and from child proceedings when in our custody. We're also responsible for the safety of the Attorney General and all the employees of the AG's office. And most recently, we assisted public health in the verification of those on home quarantine at the start of the pandemic. While minimum requirement to work as a criminal investigator is having certification from the Basic Law Enforcement Academy with the Guam Community College, or having graduated from a police academy, it also entails meeting the requirements of Section 3006A for Category 1 as a peace officer and under the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission administrative rules. We received post-certification in July of 2019 from former Post-Executive Director Robert Camacho, although we have been subjected to participate in the PFQT, the Physical Fitness Qualifications Test, since December of 2017. This job description is similar to that of a Guam police officer or a task force officer assigned to the various federal agencies, DEA, FBI, ATF. Daily, we report to work with a badge and a gun like GPD. As we leave our homes and our families, we can't foresee what hazard we may be confronted with, but the goal is to get home without incident. We are faced with the same atrocities as our counterparts, and for the reasons I discussed previously, it is our intention, we hope it is yours, to change our current situation and request from you to afford the AG criminal investigators, all 16 of us, the same hazardous pay compensation. Sejus Maasi for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Abram. Simple question to the chief and the assistant chief. I understood from your testimony before I ask the speaker and my colleagues to ask questions. When you submit the letter for compensation of customs officers or any other agencies for hazardous pay, DOE is deciding after you've already identified and declared the position is hazardous? Is that what I'm understanding?
According to the law, it allows for there's a mechanism in there that allows for review by the Department of Administration, I guess, to cross-check and verify. So one of the issues, so the big issue really is the word upon exposure and the contention that if you're exposed for 5 minutes, you get paid for 5 minutes. But in reality, that is useless because 5 minutes of 1 hour based at $10 an hour is what? So what we're trying to at least show is that through the years, the duties of many of our law enforcement officers across the government of Guam have evolved to the point where we are now collaborating and co-sharing of resources. We share resources with the Guam Police Department, the Department of Corrections. We go out and assist public health. We go out and do federal task forces. We do so much, whereas when you compare to the job duties and responsibilities of what we used to do in the past, they're completely different. But to your point, yes, so there is a mechanism in the law that does allow the Department of Administration some sort of review in this process.
So that bothers me. An office is going to tell you who's hazardous. It's like the AG's office. You tell the investigator to go tell your custom officer to go do something, but then somebody that doesn't even do anything or has anything to do with you other than to process the pay is going to say, that guy's not doing hazardous. I got a problem with that. Anyway, I'd ask my colleagues to ask any questions of the panel, and then we'll move on to the next group. I'm in support of giving all law enforcement hazardous pay. I'm a former police officer. I'm a former criminal investigator with the revenue tax. I understand what everyone in Customs go through, because I get calls from many of my family and friends of Customs. I told them when it gets to my desk on the appropriation, Senator Moylan, the majority leader has approached me about this. We need to fix this. We need to fix it to all. You can't be part of the post, but you're not really part of the post. It doesn't make sense. Either you're together as one, you're required to take all the post requirements, then you better get paid the same and be done with it and just move on. It may be a bite in the budget, but that's something that we just deal with as we go along. Madam Vice Speaker, do you have anything to say, ma'am?
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for your testimony. I think you've been very professional in your testimony and your demeanor here when the situation is really something that it's hard not to get angry, right? It feels like a very much disparate treatment between the agencies, and particularly during this COVID time. I think the law is clear. The law is clear. I don't think you need to convince us that you are putting yourselves in hazardous position, because the law has made it clear for years now that everyone agrees you are in hazardous positions, right? And from your testimony, it sounds like you have gone back and forth with DOA and done everything that you can. And I am perplexed why DOA is not here. They need to be here. They need to answer as to what their impediment is. Are they not agreeing with the list of positions that you've given them? Do they not agree with the duties that you claim are hazardous? What exactly is their problem? Because we're going to rewrite the law, and then it may be subject again to somebody's interpretation. And so I want to know what their impediment really is. And I wanted to know if your director has brought this up with the governor, because it seems so glaring from the testimony today, a glaring discrepancy, and I can't imagine why they would not want to fix that like immediately if it was brought to their attention. I would suggest that we subpoena the Department of Administration and find out exactly what the problem is. When we have laws in place that are very clear, they list Customs and Quarantine Agency very specifically as entitled to hazardous pay. They say all sworn officers of Customs and Quarantine. They say those personnel at the Office of the Attorney General employed whom he or she specifically designates. So if they've been designated by your directors, yes, DOA is supposed to look at that and identify the direct exposure personnel, and upon exposure shall be entitled to the 10% hazardous pay. Now, if the only dispute is whether you were exposed for 1 minute versus 1 hour, then let's hear that. But what we are doing here today is rewriting the entire law that already says you are entitled to hazardous pay, which is it kind of makes me angry. It's like, why should we do that and not just get an explanation from DOA why they're not enforcing that? And we've gone through this before. I remember hearing from Customs about their hazardous pay. We've also heard from the Department of Agriculture conservation officers the same thing. We met with them, we waited for them to go back and forth with DOA, same thing. I think in the end they said they were getting their hazardous pay. And so it is unbelievable. And the other thing is, I remember in the very beginning of COVID that the chairperson of oversight of Customs had the first oversight hearing held by the legislature for COVID was held in regards to Customs and what their response was going to be, how they were going to interact with the people, what their protections were going to be for them, all of that. And so did I hear you correctly to say that since the beginning of the pandemic, you have not received even the differential pay, the COVID differential pay?
No, ma'am. So we have been receiving the differential through the executive order. The challenge we're running into is because we've run out of funding. We're still submitting documentation to reflect that. But what I'm hearing is that in addition to the differential through the executive order, other law enforcement entities are also still receiving the 10% hazardous differential
sure.
through public law.
Yes, so did GPA and GWA, right?
That's
Or
my-
double pay or something. Yeah, I know. It's not acceptable, of course, that the different personnel are being treated differently. And so I don't think you need to beg or prove that you are being exposed to hazards. I think that is very clear in the law. And we need to hear from those in charge of paying why they are not doing that, or what they're, you know, and I do believe that you have gone back and forth, because I've seen it, you know, in your testimony. I've seen it in the years that I've been here, and I've seen it in the other agencies as well, that they are going back and forth with DOA in this regard. And we have nothing in front of us from DOA, Mr. Chair, that shows us what is their real issue. And so my only real question is this. So when you talked about, I think it was back in 2016, that Guam Department of Labor, OSHA, or Guam Department of Labor, Division of Occupational Safety and Health, did not do certification for hazardous duty conditions. What's the current status of that? Can that be updated, or are they refusing, or what's going on with that?
Okay, thank you, Speaker. So we received a letter from the Department of Labor regarding the certification, and the response that we received was that because of the public law that was passed into public law 33-195, no further certification from the Department of Labor is necessary, yes, or from OSHA, and that was no longer an obstacle for the agency.
That makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. The law is crystal clear to me. And if there's something that Department of Administration wants, they should put it in writing, send it to us and you, and tell us exactly what it is. And otherwise, Mr. Chair, yeah, I support the concept of this bill, but I really want to get to the root of the matter, and I want DOA to answer, Mr. Chair, for what it is that why they are denying this pay. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Oversight Chair of Customs, Majority Leader Senator Talina Nelson. Ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone. My condolences to Mrs. Tamanda. If you could please share my condolences with her due to her loss, and thank you for her ultimate sacrifice. Mrs. Apron, I do appreciate the testimony you gave today, and Mr. Ganji, it's very clear that with your injuries sustained during your time out in the field, that Customs and Quarantine, there's no question about it, should be receiving hazardous pay. We've been working since 4 years ago to try to get you guys hazardous pay. We even pushed out a bill, and we were told by the leadership at that time that the Customs and Quarantine Agency will work with Department of Administration to get your codes corrected within the system. And apparently that has not been successful. Even after numerous attempts and after many times you guys going over to DOA, having long meetings with them trying to rectify this matter. So I appreciate the hard work that you have committed your personnel to trying to get the hazardous pay coded correctly within the Department of Administration system. However, we're not able to do that, and so now we at the legislature have to take these types of measures to rewrite the law and ensure that the law is written very clearly and the interpretation is understood by all that Customs and Quarantine must receive hazardous pay. And I do find it very peculiar and interesting that we are not demanding this retroactively, especially when the law that is currently in our statute states that Customs and Quarantine should be receiving hazardous pay. And so I hope that we look for these type of avenues, if it is even possible, to see what we can do to make this a retroactive measure, Mr. Chair of Office of Finance and Budget. And so, you know, Chief, I share the same concern as the speaker that Department of Administration is not here to make it very clear as what was so difficult to institute hazardous pay. And that was actually one of my first questions when you guys came and gave your testimony and you provided the timeline for us. Thank you very much for that. Because it made it very clear the amount of effort that you have done to work with Department of Administration to see that it happened. And so, you know, I support Customs and Quarantine getting their hazardous pay, and I think it is long overdue. But I hope that we are more definitive with this bill and we can substitute it on the floor to make it very clear and not, and the interpretation is that as agreed by all that Customs and Quarantine will receive hazardous pay. And the MTO that was prepared, I don't know if Colonel Tyron is going to come and give testimony, but I thank him also for this, his testimony and his breakdown for his table of organization and equipment, and also the many things that Customs and Quarantine does. And this was a very well-written testimony that gives us an understanding of how the agency functions. And so I thank you for that. It seems that we have all of our ducks in a row, but there's evidence that Customs and Quarantine does deserve hazardous pay, long overdue, that your job is absolutely hazardous, especially the enormous amount and effort that you've done during the COVID-19 measures. That was also a very big concern for me when COVID-19 hit, is how are we going to respond to this? And so, you know, I want to thank Customs and Quarantine for the hard work that they do, everyone in the ranks, and thank you for the leadership that you provide. And let's see to get this done. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator Joanne Brown, do you have any questions to the four law enforcement officers?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I concur with the requests by Speaker Terlahi. I mean, we have, and I certainly appreciate all of you coming and providing your testimony today, but in all cases, we don't have a single head of an agency here. Maybe there are legitimate reasons, but you know, this sounds to me like an issue that should have been resolved, and I concur again with the Speaker, with the administration. I mean, you're dealing with cabinet members that work for the governor that could simply meet and address this issue. I mean, we're not here to administrate the government. We can continue to write laws, but we can write laws in a circle, and if they're not implemented, or if there's disagreement of it, that's not for us to resolve in that sense of what's already in the law. We can regurgitate it in many different forms, but this is really something that, you know, if this has been going on for a while, this is something really that should have been dealt with by the administration. That's the reality. I'm sorry. I like to sugarcoat and make it all look good and kumbaya here, but this is really an administrative matter. If the laws are already there to address it, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And you're in the case of Customs, you know, your director's not here to answer to that as to why or what actions he has taken to have this matter addressed, because this is not something that's impossible to do. I mean, if there's a need to change the law, but if there isn't and the mechanisms are already there, this is not something for our House to address, especially if on the administrative side, for whatever reason that we don't know, it's not being executed. And I have to say, you know, Mr. Chairman, we've had repeated incidences on issues that have been discussed where the key department directors are not available or simply don't show up or simply don't respond. I mean, the legislature does have the authority to subpoena these individuals. I think in this particular case, because it has been outstanding for some time, you know, of course, we extend the courtesy of asking for the director of DOA to be present, but should the director choose not to, and I don't know why not, they've been down here for other issues, why we don't compel them to come down and answer these questions, not just so much for us, but for the public and for the respective employees in this department. I appreciate, Ms. Apron, your testimony as well, but I don't see the Attorney General here. advocating for his inspectors or investigators. So, that to me is a concern, because that should be the case. The other thing too, and while I appreciate all the testimony here with regards to the respective job descriptions, let's not kid ourselves. That comes with the territory of why we choose certain professions, be it an investigator, customs officer, police officer, conservation officer, park ranger. These are duties that come with the territory, so to speak. And I agree that these things should be standardized, because that comes with the job, unless there's extraordinary circumstances on top of what would be part of these, in the case of customs, regular inspections. Boarding a vessel, doing an inspection, boarding or viewing inspecting a container comes with the territory. It's part of the job description. Would you agree, not sir, that that's the case? In the case of the investigator work, the things that you're exposed to is, of course, challenging and a hazard, but that comes with a job description. Those things should be standardized and incorporated, so we're not politicizing the process of who gets what or who gets a bigger share of what. Because you're right, you can't quantify the value of a life, especially a life of someone you love and care about. Under extraordinary circumstances, as with the case of this pandemic, and certainly I recognize the loss of your customs officer who worked at the Port Authority of Guam. Under extraordinary circumstances, everyone on Guam was exposed to the possibility, as still today. I'm very happy the numbers have significantly decreased, but all of us as a population in a pandemic are in the line of being exposed to COVID. And a number of the people have died, in all different walks of life, all different age groups were exposed to it, because we are under the extreme condition of a pandemic. Of course, this is not a normal day, but again, as was mentioned earlier by the other senators, there was a mechanism put in place to compensate employees that went to work and did their job. The work that you're doing, the work that, are people, they might be the customer service person at the agency that's receiving in payments and things of that nature that are also exposed because they're exposed to other human beings. So, I appreciate the testimony, but I don't see the value that's being gained in politicizing this issue, because these things should be incorporated by virtue of the work that you're doing, because that is the work that you're doing. I'm not going to add on to that, because that comes with the territory. You're going to be exposed to hazards. People that are not even signing up for these issues can be exposed to all kinds of hazards. But we should standardize that so that this doesn't come back in this sense. But I do request, Mr. Chair, before we continue to move forward with this bill, that we do request feedback from the Director of Administration to find out why this issue has been sitting as long as it has been sitting. And then it's the employees that are out there being challenged with this issue. They have to come in here and champion their own case, which they shouldn't have to. Those on the front lines that sit in these positions of responsibility in running these departments and agencies, by all means, they should be here. They should be here leading their troops, providing feedback, or also answering questions as to why things have not happened for this period of time, because they really shouldn't be the ones to have to advocate their issue. And come and clarify and answer as to why this has not happened. It needs to be addressed. There's no argument. You're probably not going to get any of us to argue that this issue needs to be addressed. But the mechanism of how that happens, that's the question I have. Because this to me is something that could have been addressed on the administrative side of the aisle of our government. And if it hasn't, as you relay, it has not been, then we would like to know. I would. I'm sure you would. I'm sure the public would like to know why, after all this time, under these circumstances that we're currently, and the fact that we've been, still wearing these masks, why it has not been addressed up until this point. So, Mr. Chair, I do concur, and I hope that you will follow up on that request to have Department of Administration provide a public response before the legislature as to why they have not come to agreement with Customs to address this compensation to the respective officers. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your testimony that you provided today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Brown. I will be asking them to provide a written testimony on why they haven't at least let us know. If it's the law, if the law is the excuse, then tell us and recommend to us how to fix it.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'd like a little more than a written testimony. I would like them to be able to come and dialogue and explain to us so that we can have an understanding. The respective heads of these agencies that are responsible for engaging in this discussion to come to determination I would like them to come and provide a public response to those questions rather than simply getting a written testimony. I can read a written testimony. That doesn't allow me to ask those questions, and I think we need to, because the fact that this has been sitting for the time it's been sitting, I think we are all, including the public, deserving of an open explanation of engagement as to why we're in this situation, because if it had been addressed, we wouldn't be here today deliberating this issue.
So noted. Thank you. Senator Moylan, do you have any questions to the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the panel's testimony, and yes, you really brought out very detailed reasons and justifications of why this is happening. But yes, I do agree with my colleagues that you are the ones that came in front, but your leaders were not there. Your directors are not here as well. I can see where we can amend this bill to make it even stronger, to include the other departments, the airport police and the prosecuting division, who had to take leave to come here today to testify, unfortunately. But it was good that you did come and testify and give your point of view, so I appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, looking forward to working with our committee here and doing the adjustment to title this correctly and include the other agencies as well. So I thank you, panel, very much for your testimonies, and we'll get the job done for you.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. I'd like to thank the panel. We'll take a few-minute recess while they sanitize the area, and we allow Mr. Tyrone and Mr. Gutierrez. I think one of them is a colonel and one is a captain, I think. It's all right? Thank you, Chief, Deputy Chief. Thank you, Ganji. Thank you. All right, we have Colonel Tyrone and we got Captain Gutierrez. And we'll ask you to go to make your presentation, Colonel, and then followed by the Captain.
Hafa and good afternoon. Honorable Senators Joe S. and Agustin, Chairman for the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing. And the honorable senators of this esteemed committee, some have stepped out, and other senators taking interest in supporting our customs officers' hazardous duty pay. Mr. Chairman, I'm here today to testify in favor of Bill 32-36. And just before I go forward, right, I prepared testimony for, it comes out to about 18 pages, but I'm going to spare you, the members of this committee, because in the dialogue preceding my giving testimony, I don't think I need to expand on the table of organization, because there's no argument that the hazards exist, and that's been spoken by all the senators that have given or who have spoke with us earlier. I would like to thank you for prioritizing and setting the time to hear the proposed customs hazardous pay bill. Prior to June of 2016, some customs officers received compensation for hazardous duty. Historically, for about 10 years, the agency was budgeted and paid hazardous pay differential for officers performing hazardous duty. During those times, the officers receiving hazardous duty pay differential were customs officers performing work boarding sea vessels, participating in drug raids, and maintaining custody and transport of arrestees. In June of 2016, the agency was budgeted to compensate hazardous pay differential for specific duties and positions previously certified and recognized as hazardous. However, responsible internal controls discovered the Government of Guam, Department of Labor, Division of Occupational Safety and Health, DOSH, annual assessments and certifications for hazardous duty conditions were not properly certified. Hazardous pay differential ceased, but officers performing hazardous duty work did not. Because of our mandates at the border, customs officers continue to perform hazardous duty at our borders, minus the compensation. The budget supports the ability to compensate officers, but our administrative and financial controls do not. Certainly, I think we can overcome this situation through legislation. The continuing paradox our customs heroes face remains our entitlement and recorded performance of hazardous duty, dismembered from the promised compensation that hinges on two directors of the same cabinet and administration agreeing, specifically the agreement between the director of the Department of Administration and the director of our Customs and Quarantine Agency. My director agrees, but since June of 2016, the director of the Department of Administration has not. You would think that this arrangement would be easy to execute. The paradox of executive branch, unified, and allied cabinet members for the past and current administration has not agreed that our customs work is hazardous. This situation exists even after the Government of Guam's Department of Labor, Division of Occupational Safety and Health confirmed through their review and assessment that customs work is hazardous and no longer requires recertification, because the work hazards present is not expected to change. Words are so important, and the current law that requires the agreement between two directors requires legislative remedy. Through passage of this bill into law, the vexing inconsistencies between individuals concerning customs officers' hazardous pay will be resolved. On September 27, 2016, during a public hearing, I presented the Customs Agency's Table of Organization. And to Mr. Chairman's statement of his familiarity with the TOE, that's all I call this document that you'll find in the last 3 pages of my testimony as a table of organization, for I do not include equipment. Customs doesn't have that similar function. On September, it is no secret that Guam Customs border operations continue to evolve and expand to meet current day security threats. Our table of organization represents our officers' voices, and we seek the support of this esteemed body to pass this bill and provide resolution. As the guardian of the purse, I understand y legislaturan Guajan's concerns with an across-the-board hazardous pay differential for all customs officers once they assume duty. I respectfully remind my honorable senators, the Customs Agency's operations are funded by customs service charges, and only during times of reduced air travel or merchandise import is the general fund impacted. I urge this body towards an extension and shift of that fiscal paradigm. As a society, we are no longer naive to the effects of terrorism, transnational crime, and the weaponizing and natural occurrence of contagious diseases leading to pandemics during border security operations. Our recent experiences with the COVID-19 virus, the events of 9/11, and the ensuing threats to national and local security bolster my plea for the approval of hazardous pay differential for all customs officers identified in the TOO. I am asking for this committee to transfer responsibility for hazardous duty compensation of customs officers through statute to the Director of Customs through passage of Bill 32-36. The Director of Customs is responsible for the budget of the Guam Customs Agency and fittingly the appropriated funding that currently exists to support 2021 hazardous pay. I'm asking for this body to approve the Director of Guam Customs' ability to retroactively compensate officers for hazardous duty work performed from June 2016 up to the passage of Bill 3236 into law for the hazardous duty they continue to perform to protect our borders and our people. To this point, my appeal has been to the hearts of this esteemed body, but please allow me to come full circle from the perspective of hearts and minds in my testimony by appealing now to your minds and expertise in the application of controls. At this point is where I will transition and forego giving specific areas of the TOO and then examples of the work that we perform. I think that we'll be laboring on this if I was to do so. And if you allow me to, I will move towards the end of my testimony and close out. To close and to provide two industry standards, I present a question asked and answered on the U.S. Office of Personnel Management's webpage. The question is, if an employee performs a hazardous duty, as listed in Appendix A, for an hour during the work week, does he or she receive the hazard pay for only that hour? The response provided was no. When an employee performs a duty for which a hazard pay is authorized, the agency must pay the hazard pay for all of the hours in which the employee is in a pay status on the day on which the duty is performed. The other standard is the differential percentage comparison. The government of Guam's hazardous duty differential is 10%, but the U.S. OPM, Office of Personnel Management standard for hazardous pay differential is 25%. Perhaps our government might consider adopting similar best practices. I want to thank you for your time and attention. Subject to your questions, this concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Colonel. Cam Gutierrez, sir.
Hafa Senators, my name is Franklin Gutierrez Jr. I'm a captain with the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency. I'm currently the supervisor of the Contraband Enforcement Team and the Federal Task Force officers under the Special Enforcement Division. I've been a custom officer for over 25 years. I want to keep this short. I've been listening to all the prior testimonies, and I believe everybody's on the same sheet of music at this point, but there's a lot of officers that couldn't make it today because they're still working the front line, so they've actually had asked me to come down and just kind of speak and to show support. And we also have some officers outside that are in support, and there will be other written testimony that will be given. But I wanted to personally say thank you to the senators for finally finding a solution on this hazardous pay issue. This has been lingering since 2016. And basically, from what I understand, the bill that Senator Moylan and the other senators had introduced was that this is basically going to take the person who makes that determination away from DOA and brings it back to the Director of Customs. And it basically falls in line of what GPD is doing, because GPD doesn't appear to have a problem with their chief of customs and them getting their 10% hazardous pay. So I believe this bill basically addresses the deficiency or whatever technical issue that DOA has not been able to pay us for all those years. But I can tell you this, and the chief and Colonel Phil as well, we have boxes and boxes of documents, and there's like, do it this way, change the hazardous pay this way, use this code. And we've done everything we could do to satisfy DOA, but up to this date, we have not been able to receive this hazardous pay. And I cannot answer that. They're going to have to be the ones to answer that. But I know that one of the issues that we had was, or it might have been wording on the law, or the formal law back in 2016 relative to upon exposure. And, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how to read it, but when I read that law, it basically, it gives us enough justification is that, we should be paid it. And I believe the spirit of the bill was to pay the officers their 10% of what was deserved. So I'm in full support of Bill 32-36. I hope that Guam Custom officers will finally receive the hazardous pay compensation they deserve due to the many hazards they are subject to while on duty, from boarding and inspecting airplanes, people, passengers, baggage, cargo, passenger ships, private vessels, and even 40-foot containers. You guys saw some officers that were injured in the line of duty. And this is, the hazards are real. And unfortunately, things happen. In 1995, when I first joined Customs, I was told that, we're the front line as Customs and quarantine officers. And when we were out there clearing an aircraft, for example, and if there was a sick passenger or passengers, and we made a determination that this might be something that could be contagious, through our supervisors, there may be a time where we have to shut that door and quarantine the plane to include ourselves, because now we're subject to that. So just think of that for a moment. Imagine yourself as that officer, sitting, having to quarantine himself and basically, being there to protect this island from the spread. When the news of COVID-19 pandemic started, who do you think was posted at Guam's ports of entry? This virus didn't just appear on this island. It was imported, right? It was brought in through passengers, mostly through human contact, but and then also the crew members that are arriving through the airport and the port, and then as well as the military. We know the issues that the Theodore Roosevelt had when Guam had to step up and help the aircraft carrier and house them. So these were real things that our officers were dealing with. And while most of GovGuam was shut down, to include the Guam legislature during the pandemic one, your Guam Customs officers were identified as essential workers and reported for duty every day since the start of this pandemic. Unfortunately, it took a pandemic like COVID-19 to showcase the known and unknown hazards that Customs officers face to protect our island. Things got real when we lost one of our own last year to COVID-19. Rest in peace, Officer Renny Tumunda. I personally had the opportunity to be his supervisor during the first 6 months of the pandemic, and I know that his wife providing that testimony that the chief had read earlier, that's just a testament that, again, the pandemic is, the hazards are real for our officers. Just the other day, talking to some officers assigned to the airport, every day, they open and they look at the Joint Information Center, the JIC release, and you see it. Maybe our numbers are low now, but we would see it, and we're seeing positive, positive, positive. And when you look at it, you say, identified at the government quarantine facility. So where do you think those people were coming from? They're coming more than likely from the airport. And where are they passing through? The customs officers are there processing their bags. So this is the type of anxiety that the officers are facing to this day, with this pandemic, that the unknown. Are they going to get a call for contact tracing because, maybe they were the one that conducted a secondary in the bag? Were they the ones within the 6 feet distance? Was there sustained contact? These are some of the hazards that, this is just one of the examples. But today, every day, my fellow officers report to work at all the various ports of entries and specialized units to protect the people of Guam from illicit drugs, precursor chemicals, invasive species, and other related hazards before they are able to make it inland. We are Guam's first line of defense. Find it, seize it, Customs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Senator Brown, do you have any questions for the two gentlemen?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. No, I don't, but again, I appreciate you for coming forth and providing your testimony. As I mentioned, I hate to see this process politicized or you being put in this situation. I think this is something that could be very easily resolved and granted. I mean, the course of your work that you do, you are exposed to these hazards. I think it should be standardized so that it becomes a non-issue. And then other areas, as I was looking at some of the other testimony by some of your fellow officers, I just wanted to ask maybe just one quick question with regards to safety equipment and safety gear. Just because some of these things, be it boarding the aircraft and, the fumes and things like that, I mean, do you guys have those safety equipment available in the event these circumstances arise so that, you're not continuously exposed to things that can be prevented or can be, protected from what you inhale and what you do? I mean, you could open a container, there could be some toxic material in there that you don't know. But is that something you guys have readily available also as extra levels of protection? Because sometimes when you receive certain injuries, you can't undo it. Money cannot undo it. And I think as we get older, we realize our health is probably the most valuable thing we have. And sometimes money, even no matter how much money they throw at us, it's not going to fix that. So I'm just asking because as I read through the testimony here that was provided by fellow officers, some of those things got brought up where protective equipment can minimize issues of exposure. So just wanted to ask you while I have the opportunity of having you here.
I'm going to yield to respond because Captain Gutierrez is closer to the operational area, and he'll know that firsthand. He knows what his people are going through. So I'm going to let Cap handle that response.
In regards to safety equipment, we do have safety equipment such as vests, N95 masks, and stuff like that. But the items, so N95 masks, wearing the proper equipment, if you're subject to possible fentanyl exposure, for example, that I believe is enough. But when you're talking about chemicals and fumes, and especially fumes that you can't see, right, or possibly even can't smell, we don't have we are lacking equipment as far as a full respirator type system, and those are items that I believe we've put in, or our chief and director will start putting in regarding additional equipment. Way back when Homeland Security first did open, we were given a set of PPE type equipment, such as the suits and boots and everything. Those things have a shelf life. So I want to say that everything that we've received prior to that has expired, and we have not received any updated items at this point. But that is something that I'm in total agreement that we need to ensure that we have that equipment necessary to even include, we're working on just like testing chemicals. So a lot of times when officers are there, there's you just have a white powder or you just have something, right? So you can say it might look like this, but you have to test it with specific test kits, right? And these are field test kits. So there's new technology out there, things like TrueNart, where you don't have to physically open up the parcel or the package to possibly, especially when things are vacuum sealed and things like that, where things can come out into the air. These new technologies are there that you can test these equipment without having to open it up, and then the system will actually run through through all the different levels. It'll even tell you if it's sugar, if it's baby powder, or if it's illegal drugs. So those are the technologies that are out there and that we're currently working on procuring these new type of testing equipment. And these are all part of the PPE for the officers to keep them safe.
Well, I know the money is not endless, but I mean, at least in terms of what you believe is the most critical priority of resources that you need that can be available to minimize these issues. Because again, sometimes we don't know what we're encountering while you're doing an inspection. We don't know. We don't know what's out there. But I appreciate the testimony, and thank you very much for coming down and talking with us.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Moylan, do you have any questions to the two officers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Colonel and Captain, for your testimonies. Again, it further strengthens what we need to do, and I appreciate your coming down here and leading the troops to come and testify as well. I think it's really helpful that we hear it directly from you folks, and we know we can make this bill even stronger in committee. So we're looking forward to working within committee and strengthening this bill further so we can get you folks paid expeditiously as soon as possible. So thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Colonel Tyrone, appreciate your testimony. I like the TO, the T-O, not the T-O-E. We're on track, right? Because we're not talking equipment, even though Senator Brown brought up about equipment. I think customs, like any other law enforcement, por favor, get your program together. Identify what you need and what you're supposed to have so that it's in line. Because when we start going down the road on the budget, as much as we're going to want Department Administration and everybody else to come here and testify why they couldn't take care of you, if push comes to shove, I'll be asking them to support that we're going to identify each agency that has requirement for hazardous pay and so forth. And we'll just go down the road. If they want to play hide and seek, they can hide and we'll seek the funds and put it in place. And then we just figure out a way to do this. The goal is to work as one. Customs needs to get paid. I'm well aware of that. We've discussed that many years, and just trying to get over this. What you presented, I'm assuming then that this is what the chief will be, or the director will be presenting, right? Your TO, because it's perfect. You identified every hazardous requirement, and you also identified what I brought up earlier, that, if you're not in the hazardous net, you don't get the pay, and it states that. It's very clear. It's very clean. But we'll figure out something, and exactly what Senator Brown asked for. And I brought it up to the author and the oversight of customs. We'll figure out what we need to do and where we need to go to get this wrapped up. And because the AG's office investigators have spoken, there's folks and the different other agencies, and because it became germane, the different agencies was mentioned, this could actually close the loop for all law enforcement and be done with it. DOA, have a nice day, follow the rules of engagement, and we'll move on from there. And you guys can move on. All right? Thank you, Colonel and Captain Gutierrez. There are no one else listed to testify. That being said, the committee will continue to receive testimony. And please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator joe@gmail.com or to my office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam. Jesus Marcy for your attendance and participating in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. This public hearing on Bill 32-36 is now adjourned. It is now 11:43. Please have a nice day. Take care. Be safe.